This week, we encounter the quintessential Parsha of holiness, Parshat Kedoshim. In a clarion call, the Parsha opens with, Daber al kol adat b'nei Yisrael v'emarta alehem Kedoshim tihiyu, ki kadosh ani Hashem Elokeichem. Speak to the entire assembly of the children of Israel and say to them, You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. The holiness of God stands as a paradigm for the holiness of humanity. God's holiness, albeit distinct and unique, nonetheless is the image by which we hold ourselves accountable, the barometer by which we gauge ourselves and our community. The classic medieval commentary of Rashi, based on the Midrash, wonders why the Torah felt it necessary to include the word adat, assembly, in this verse, and why it was not enough to just say, speak to the children of Israel, rather than speak to the entire assembly of the children of Israel. Rashi states that this declaration, this call of holiness, had to be recited in front of every man, woman, and child. Every individual had to hear the call of Kedoshim Tihiyu, you shall be holy. The words had to penetrate every heart and find their way into the thoughts of every person. Holiness, the call of Kedusha, becomes the focal point, the epicenter for all that the Torah represents and works to achieve in our lives. As Rashi says, Bipnei sherov gufei Torah taluyin ba. For the majority of the body of the Torah rests in it, in this one stark declaration. The question remains, especially in a world where all too often people succumb to the dangers of a holiness predicated on societal separation. What sort of holiness are we referring to? What sort of Kedusha is the Torah asking us to transform our lives into? The Torah itself provides the answer to this question in the verse immediately following this declaration. Ish imo v'aviv tira'u v'et shabtotai tishmaru ani Hashem Elokeichem. A person's mother and father one must have awe for, and my Shabbat you shall guard, for I am the Lord your God. How does one create this culture of Kedusha? One does so by respecting their parents, and then, only then, by specific ritual religious observances. What does it mean to respect one's parents in the broad sense of the term? A person who respects and has awe for their parents understands that their life did not develop in a vacuum, that their existence was not the product of randomness, but rather that they owe their lives to two other people. They recognize that no matter how independent they become, how much they have accomplished in their lives, that they could not and will continue to not be able to do it alone. But rather, it is the interdependence both on their parents and on the fabric of society at large that they owe their success. This recognition leads to an active existence in community, a desire to cultivate relationships and not to ignore them, to respect societal rules and not to flaunt them, and to live a life of Kedusha, a life of holiness with others, and not apart from them. Ramban, the great mystic, discusses the phenomenon of holiness in community while commenting on these verses. He argues that a person who, while fully observant in the laws of the Torah, can nonetheless still be a disgrace in the eyes of the Torah. This is possible, according to Ramban, by while keeping all the dictates of the Torah, a person indulges themselves to an extreme in everything that is not technically prohibited. The way in which a person avoids this route is first and foremost a recognition that this train of thought is misguided and wrong. A person gains this self-awareness by living amongst others in a larger society and by being open to feedback from others. Kedusha is fostered, developed, and nurtured precisely in the bonds of community. It is within the framework of Ish imo v'aviv tira'u, of respecting one's parents, and more generally, of appreciating, caring for, and living within the larger community that holiness is created and manifested.